Hey everyone, welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. We are here today to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles 2023 to 2024 NFL season schedule. That dropped last night as a part of the NFL's annual schedule release event that they broadcasted on NFL Network, and it was leaked in the early part of the week. But we do want to take some time and talk a little bit about this schedule and really make some way too early predictions. And also just to take a look and analyze where might be some of the trickier spots in the schedule this year. Over the course of the 22 to 23 season, the season that just concluded, one of the chief critiques of us was that we had a easy schedule, which seriously, no. But also, this will be rectified this year. We don't have that excuse. I'm taking a look at the schedule now, and it is a very intense schedule in parts. So we'll take some time. We'll dissect it. We'll look at it. We'll see where the challenge spots are, and we'll see whether or not the Eagles can go 17-0 over the course of the 2023 season, which they absolutely could. No, I'm kidding. But in any event, let's take a look at this here. You've probably at this point already seen the schedule release. You've probably already at this point seen the scheduled release videos that the Eagles put out featuring all of the various dogs that that belong to members of the Eagles organization. So let's take a look at it here. Let's run through the schedule really quickly. The Eagles will open, as it was rumored leading up to the schedule release. We do open the year with a trip to New England to take on the New England Patriots. That night will be the Tom Brady Memorial Night. It will also be the opportunity for the Eagles to remind Tom Brady of the fact that Nick Foles beat him in a Super Bowl. So the Eagles will open the year at New England on September the 10th. They will then jump into the very first Thursday night football game of the year, which is a home game versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you'll recall, last year, the Eagles also faced off against the Minnesota Vikings in prime time in week 2 of the NFL season. They faced off at that point against Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings in Monday Night Football. This year, it will be in Thursday Night Football. So the Eagles will start the year off with a short week. Then they move to week 3, taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. That'll be their first Monday Night Football appearance of the season. One of the new things this year is that teams were not necessarily guaranteed a primetime spot. So this also opened up the opportunity for teams to have multiple primetime appearances, particularly in multiple different time slots. Week 4, we take on the Commanders at home, standard 1 o'clock game. Week 5, we travel out to LA to take on the Los Angeles Rams. Week 6, we travel over to East Rutherford, New Jersey to take on the New York Jets, now under the leadership of their new quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. October 22nd is week 7. That is the Miami Dolphins. We'll face the Miami Dolphins at home. October 29th is week 8. We take on the Washington Commanders. We take them on in Washington this time. And then November 5th is the Dallas Cowboys, the first of our 2 matchups against them. That will be at home. That's week 9. Week 10 is the bye week. Week 11 is a very highly anticipated game, the rematch of Super Bowl 57 with the Kansas City Chiefs. We will face the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City on Monday Night Football. Huge. That is the second of the Eagles' Monday Night Football appearances. November 26th, taking on the Buffalo Bills at home, then going on to December 3rd, the San Francisco 49ers, taking them on at home. Then December 10th, heading down to Dallas for Sunday Night Football. Then on December the 17th, we go to Seattle. Then December the 25th, Christmas Day, of course. Monday, 4:30, taking on the New York Giants. And then December 31st is the Arizona Cardinals, taking them on at home, the return of Jonathan Gannon. And then to close out the year, we will face the New York Giants in East Rutherford at MetLife Stadium. And hopefully by that point, we will have had our ticket punched to the playoffs, and we'll see what happens on that front there. So, looking at this schedule, as a fan, as somebody who watches the game, what I would say is the first 5 weeks are great. They are the best schedule that any Eagles fan could probably ask for, because you look at this schedule, who are we facing? We're facing the New England Patriots, who, let's face it, since Tom Brady left them, have not been nearly as good as they were. Facing the Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football. And yes, that might be a little bit of a challenge, but we have historically pounced on the Minnesota Vikings. Going down to Tampa Bay, where the NFC South is objectively a weak conference. So you can't say that it's going to be a challenge of a game. And again, Tom Brady's no longer playing for them, so any threat of that is gone. The Washington Commanders, they will probably, by the time the season kicks off, have new ownership. If that's the case, we'll see what happens there. But the reality is a lot of the pieces in the Washington Commanders are already kind of set. Any ownership change probably wouldn't impact the current season. It would probably impact seasons farther down the line. And then heading out to LA, who are still kind of rebuilding from their win it now year, and they're still kind of paying the cost for that. So those first 5 games, New England, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Washington, and LA Rams, are really, really good matchups for us. And I would not be surprised if the Eagles try to capitalize on a lot of that. Looking at towards the middle of the schedule, those last 4 games before the bye week, I mean, we have the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers. It'll be an interesting challenge to see how he's doing, but it's also the Jets, and they really haven't been known lately for being a good football team. Miami, Washington again, and then the Dallas Cowboys. I don't see it unreasonable for us to do a really, really good job with this early stretch before the bye, these first 9 weeks. Then the bye week happens, and then we have to run the gauntlet. So looking on the second half of the year, I'm not as feeling as good about the second half of the year as I am in the first half. Kansas City, certainly, that's a playoff team. Buffalo, playoff team. San Francisco, playoff team. Dallas again. I mean, Dallas was a playoff team. The only team in the NFC East that didn't make the playoffs last year was the Washington Commanders. Seattle, playoff team. New York Giants, playoff team. Arizona was really the only non-playoff team in that last stretch of the year that we'll be facing. So I am a little bit more concerned about the second half of the year than I am about the first half. Just looking at things that have occurred, looking at basing it off of their performance last season. What have they done in free agency? What have they done in the draft? What have the Eagles done over the course of free agency and the draft? I do feel good about the schedule. I just don't feel like we're definitely not going to be crossing the 14-win threshold. Again, way too early prediction. So, staying on this way too early predictions theme, let's take a look at each of these sort of blocks here. So we have the first 5 games. Again, New England, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Washington, and LA. I would not be surprised if we, at the end of going through that stretch of 5 games, are undefeated. Again, I would love to see that. Realistically, somebody like the Washington Commanders or the LA Rams or the Minnesota Vikings could become a trap game. And I only throw the Minnesota Vikings in there because it's Thursday Night Football. The Eagles, again, historically have pounced on the Minnesota Vikings. I don't see any realistic reason why we should be concerned about that game this far away from the season. other than it's Thursday Night Football. But the fact that it's Thursday Night Football could throw in a little bit of a wrench there. So I will, for the time being, throw that in as possibly a trap game. Again, Washington Commanders or LA could also be trap games there. So we do need to just be mindful of that because LA is the first game of a 2-game road stretch. We want to make sure that we're focusing on that. So again, I'm looking at this schedule, and I would not be surprised if we are 5-0, 4-1 at worst by the time we finish those first 5 games. So looking ahead to the second block, the last 4 games before the bye, again, New York Jets. It'll be interesting to see what Aaron Rodgers does with them, but I don't think that they're going to be as competitive. I would suggest that that's going to be probably a win for us. Miami, again, I'm not seeing any real concerns on that front there. Really, the biggest concerns would be the Washington Commanders or the Dallas Cowboys, again, as potential trap games. If we don't beat the Commanders in the first block, we could lose to them in the second block. Dallas, realistically, we always play each other tough. And we historically, last year we split the series. Going into the bye will be absolutely necessary where it is. Looking at that first stretch of the year, the Eagles have really only faced 4 playoff teams over the course of those first 9 games. So less than half of those first 9 games are going to be against playoff teams. Following the bye, the only non-playoff team, the only team that didn't make the playoffs last year that we're going to be facing is the Arizona Cardinals. Kansas City, we faced them in the Super Bowl. Buffalo was in the playoffs. San Francisco, we faced them in the NFC Championship game. Dallas again, they lost to San Francisco. Seattle got knocked out of the playoffs. New York, we faced them twice in the course of the last stretch, the New York Giants. So the Cardinals are really the only team that didn't make the playoffs last year. Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, back to Dallas, Seattle. That stretch there, I see us losing at least 2 games. I see us going 3-2. Optimistically speaking, we're going 4-1, losing to Buffalo or Kansas City. I don't see us leaving that gauntlet with a losing record or going on a losing record in that gauntlet. I do see us losing a couple of games there. And then New York, Arizona, and New York again. Hopefully we will sweep the New York Giants and Arizona. In the worst case scenario, we could lose that last game, but that would only be depending on the playoff implications surrounding it. So again, looking at this schedule, I do think that there is a very optimistic setup of 13-4. I don't think we're going 14-3 or better like we did last year. I think we are going to ceiling out at 13-4. We'll see what happens. Realistically, we'll probably wind up being closer to a 10 or 11 win team. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Birds Nest Podcast. You can support the Birds Nest Podcast by liking and subscribing to Birds Nest Media on YouTube and hitting that bell icon for new notifications. And you can also share us to your social media pages. It really helps the channel out. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify, anywhere that you can get your podcasts. You can also visit birdsnestmedia.com for the latest Eagles news, and if you feel so inclined to support more endeavors like this, you can also find a way to support that through Patreon. So thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles.